Hey there, and welcome. So, if you've ever found yourself wondering exactly how major websites manage to survive massive, sudden spikes in traffic without just completely crashing, well, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're doing a full explainer on performance testing, starting right from scratch. We are going to completely review and demystify the ultimate stress testing tool, Apache JMeter. To really wrap our heads around why performance testing is so absolutely crucial, let's look at a quick metaphor. Imagine you're building a massive, magnificent bridge. You've tested the functionality, right? The asphalt is perfectly smooth, the paint looks great, everything looks exactly the way it's supposed to. But here's the million-dollar question. How much weight can it actually hold before it completely collapses? Like, sure, it's functionally perfect, but can it handle real-world rush hour traffic? Well, in the software world, performance testing is exactly how we answer that question. We literally have to mimic the stress of thousands or even millions of users hitting the system at the exact same time just to see if our digital bridge holds up, or if the database and servers just buckle under the pressure. And honestly, that brings us right to our superhero tool for the job, Apache JMeter. Created by the Apache Software Foundation, this is a 100% pure Java, completely open source application, and it's specifically designed to put your software under heavy load to measure exactly how it performs. And because it runs on the Java virtual machine, it's totally cross-platform. That means you can easily tune it and run massive loads from almost any operating system. It really is the ultimate tool for stress testing your applications way before the real users ever show up. All right, so here's a quick look at our agenda for this explainer. First, what is Apache JMeter? Second, setting up your environment. Third, the core building blocks. Fourth, recording real-world scenarios. 5, running from the command line. And finally, number 6, some essential testing best practices. Let's dive in. Section 1. What is Apache JMeter? So, JMeter has evolved massively over the years. It was initially designed just to test web applications. But today, it is a total powerhouse. You can test SOAP and REST web services, FTP, and you can even dive deep into your backend to test databases using JDBC. What this really means is you're testing the entire stack, not just the front end. And it pulls all this off by simulating thousands of virtual concurrent users to mimic real-world scenarios perfectly. Moving on to Section 2, setting up your environment. Okay, since JMeter is a Java application, step 1 is an absolute must. You have got to verify that Java is actually installed on your system. You can easily do this by popping open your command prompt or terminal and just typing java-version. Now, if you don't have it, no big deal. You'll just need to download the Java JDK and set up your system's Java environment variables. Specifically, you want to look at the Java_home path because, honestly, that is where like 90% of installation headaches usually happen. Once that's all good to go, you just download the JMeter binary zip file directly from their official website, extract it, hop into the bin folder, and run jmeter.bat if you're on Windows, or jmeter.sh if you are on a Mac or Linux. Boom, you're in. Section 3. The core building blocks. So every single JMeter test starts with what's called a test plan. And inside that plan, you have 3 really critical components. Let's go back to our bridge metaphor to make sense of them. First, you have the thread group. These are your virtual users, so think of them as the actual cars driving onto the bridge. Second, you have samplers. These are the actual requests being sent to your server, kind of like the specific directions all those cars are traveling. And finally, you have listeners. These are your reports and results. Think of the listeners as the engineers standing on the bridge with clipboards, measuring exactly what's going on. Let's take a slightly closer look at the thread group. This is where you actually control the traffic flow. You tell JMeter exactly how many virtual users you want to simulate, but you don't just dump them all onto the server at millisecond 0. That essentially simulates a DDoS attack, not natural, everyday human traffic. So you set a ramp-up period to realistically scale that load. For example, if you want 10 users with a 20-second ramp-up, JMeter is going to politely introduce 1 new user every 2 seconds. You can also set your loop count right here, which just means how many times those users should repeat their specific actions. Now, when your samplers actually start sending out those requests, the listeners are busy recording all the timing. Let's trace a single request so we can understand these really crucial metrics. Okay, at 0 milliseconds, the request is sent. At maybe 1,000 milliseconds, we might get our connects time. This is when that initial TCP connection with the server is established. Then, at 1,200 milliseconds, we hit our latency. Now, listen closely here because this is important. Latency is not when the response is finished. It's the time to first byte. It's the exact moment we start getting the response back. Finally, let's say at 2000 milliseconds, we get the complete response, and that is our total response time. These metrics, they are your ultimate diagnostic tool. If your latency is super high, you probably have network or routing issues. But if your latency is low and your response time is high, well, then your server is likely struggling to actually process the request. Section 4, recording real-world scenarios. Instead of sitting there manually building out every single click and form submission block by block, JMeter has this genuinely magical feature. It's called the HTTPS test script recorder. You essentially just turn JMeter into a proxy server, you set your browser's proxy to point to localhost on port 8888, install a little security certificate that JMeter generates so it can actually read the HTTPS traffic, and then you just browse your website normally. JMeter automatically builds all the samplers for you in the background. Or, alternatively, if you want an even easier route, you can just use a browser extension like BlazeMeter. I gotta say, this is an absolute game changer and a massive time saver. You just click record in your browser, perform your actions like a normal user, and then you export a ready-to-use .jmx test file right straight into JMeter. Easy! Section 5, running from the command line. So when you first open JMeter, it actually gives you a warning right off the bat. And that's because the graphical user interface, the GUI mode, is extremely resource heady. Those visual listeners we just talked about, like the view results tree, they will consume just massive amounts of your computer's memory. The GUI is really only meant to be your drawing board. It's strictly for creating tests, maybe doing a quick debug run with, 5 users, and just making sure everything works smoothly. But when you want to simulate 10,000 users, you absolutely must use the command line mode because it is incredibly resource efficient. Here is the essential command line syntax that you are really going to want to memorize to run a real test. You basically just open your terminal, navigate over to the JMeter bin folder, and type jmeter-n-t test.jmx-l results.jtl. Okay, so what does that mean? The N stands for no GUI. This is what runs your test headless and prevents those massive memory crashes we literally just talked about. The T specifies your actual test plan file. And the L just tells JMeter where you want to log all those results. Once this headless test finishes up, you can safely load that .jtl results file right back into the JMeter GUI, or you can even generate a really beautiful HTML report to analyze all your data. Section 6, essential testing best practices. All right, let's talk safety rules. First and absolutely foremost, never, ever, ever test an application that you don't own or that you don't have explicit written approval to test. Seriously, a heavy load test looks exactly like a malicious DDoS attack to a server. Get permissions first. Second, always establish a baseline. Run a test with maybe 10 users first, check out those metrics, and then use that data to compare against your big 5,000 user test. Third, try to use a dedicated, isolated test environment that perfectly mimics your production setup, just so other random network traffic doesn't end up skewing your results. Fourth, you've got to add realistic think time. Real human beings actually pause to read a web page, right? They don't just click 50 links a second. Adding random delays makes your test so much more accurate. And finally, plan a strategy for test data cleanup. Think about it. If your test creates 10,000 brand new user accounts in a database, you definitely need a guaranteed way to completely wipe them out later. And honestly, that perfectly maps out the entire core workflow of Apache JMeter. We went from ensuring you have Java installed to understanding thread groups and samplers, all the way down to executing massive, heavy-duty tests securely right from the command line. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Now that you have the literal superpower to simulate 1 million users and find the exact breaking point of absolutely any digital bridge out there, what will you stress test first? And maybe more importantly, do you have permission? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy testing.